week, we're talking about church culture shifts, specifically around building a church culture that makes disciples that make disciples. And with us today is Albie Powers, lead pastor of Elm City Church in Keene, New Hampshire. I'm Gina Mueller, disciple-making catalyst for Vision New England, and your host today for the Church in Action. Albie, welcome, my friend. Thanks for hanging with us for a bit today.
Thanks for having me on.
Hey, get us started. Give us a bit of an introduction. Tell us more about you, your fam, where you are, all about what you do.
Yeah, so I'm in Keene, New Hampshire, southwest corner, and I'm pastoring a church called Elm City Church that started just finishing up 7 years. And so I started it with a few others. And so it's been definitely an interesting journey the last 7 years. It's been cool. I'm from the Keene area. So I grew up here, went away down south to Virginia, Boston for about 10 years or so, and then got the opportunity to move back in about 2011. And then in 2018, started the process of church planting. And so I have my wife, Beth. We're going to celebrate 15 years of marriage this year. And then a daughter, Nora, who's 11, and my son, Albert, who is 8. And so they're off at camp this week at Camp Spofford, and things are going great with that.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Okay, so I want to talk with you today all about all things building church culture, and specifically, what does it look like? What does it take? What are the kind of foundations of creating a culture in our church that truly makes healthy disciples that reproduce themselves, healthy disciples that know how to make more disciples? We talk a lot about how do we equip and empower everyday people so that they know how to go and make disciples in their everyday, normal, ordinary lives. So as you think about the culture that shapes Elm City Church, what are the values, the foundational principles, the important things that you have put in place that kind of cultivate how you invest in formation, community, and mission?
Yeah, there's something we did in the beginning that has both been helpful in keeping it at the forefront, but at the same time isn't the thing that actually does the thing, but it keeps it out in front of us. So my dad owns a company, and they use this thing called EOS traction, which is just a way of keeping your mission, vision, and values in front of you at all times. And so we kind of use that format in the beginning to take those mission, visions, and values and use it. So, when we started off, I was really fortunate. I've been coached by Bob Logan, who's a church planting coach for the last 7 or 8 years. And right from the beginning, thought like, hey, when we plant this church, we don't just want to plant a church. We want to plant a church planting church. And so even from day one, we said our 10-year goal is we want to, plant 2 churches and have 25 community groups in our first 10 years. Now, at the time, we didn't know how to do that, and we weren't even sure would we be able to do that. But we felt like this is the thing that God is calling us into. And then we thought about, what are our 3 big, I like to say culture, 3 big values, because values shape culture.
Yes.
And so our 3 big values that we try to live into were for Keene, which is this emphasis on locality, multiplication, and everybody plays. And so a lot of what we did was kind of filtered through that lens. And over the last 7 years, there's been different, I would say, phases where one is emphasized over the other. But those things, so what's great about traction, it's like that's right on one page. And then every year we have a 2-day annual planning retreat where we look at our 10-year goals and be like, hey, are we on track for these? Are these still our values? We kind of wrestle with them every year, set 5 to 7 big core goals for the year, and then every quarter reevaluate them. But then it kind of trickles it back to every staff meeting we do every week. So I think what's been helpful about, in a sense, the trellis of EOS is it keeps multiplication, developing disciples, training in front of us in a way where we can't be like, oops, we haven't talked about that for 6 months as a team.
Yeah.
But that's not the thing that actually makes disciples, but it keeps it on the forefront of your mind, which has been really helpful.
Absolutely. And so those 3 values have really shaped who you are as a church.
Yeah.
and the kinds of things that you're pressing into. Can you just briefly unpack those three things and how
Yeah,
maybe
sure.
how they've fleshed themselves out over the last 7 years?
So for Keene, it kind of came out of Tim Keller's work in Center Church when he talked about how there's 4 different postures a church can take towards a city. You could be in a city that you're just kind of there. You can be against a city where it's always kind of a posture of protest. You can be with the city. Basically, your values are indistinguishable from it. So a lot of, I won't even say, because then you take a pot shot. That's not necessary. And then you are for the city, which means you care about the things that are going on. You work for, you're involved, but you also hold your gospel distinctives. So there's going to be some times where your values like directly opposite of the city. So that, allowed us from the beginning to, do even simple things like we're right in the downtown part of Keene. And one thing Keene does really well is downtown events. So every year we do a downtown block party. It's all free. It's like a kind of like a big sort of carnival type thing. And a lot of people come through there, and allows us to, connect with people in just a pretty simple way. We do it probably every other year. We do this big Christmas event in town that we hold at the Colonial, either the Colonial on the campus of Keene State, because there's tons of people in our community that still have a nostalgia for Christmas. But I would say maybe 10% at most have identifiable church home. So it's sort of like kind of joke. It's like Christmas Eve light for those people. We've partnered a lot with community organizations because there's certain things, being young, we don't have built out when it comes to helping the poor in our community or food drive. But we have organizations we work with that do all those things. So instead of starting our own, we work with them. And it was just everything from that to just our posture. Like we hold conservative evangelical beliefs, will be traditional for that, but just sort of the posture in which you hold them changes a little bit when you're thinking about it through the eyes of being for the city.
Yeah.
And that's one that people grasp pretty quickly, because we even intentionally have 3 or 4 of these events a year, so that even if you're new, usually every couple of months, there's one of these things for you to participate in to kind of be a part of the culture.
It's great.
So that's the 4. Then multiplication, the idea that, everything healthy, or you want to reproduce healthy multiplication. There's lots of multiplication that isn't healthy. And so in our groups, we're always trying to develop, okay, who's the next person who could lead? Do we have good leadership development processes? If we're going to have 25 groups, ultimately these are groups forming out of other groups, emphasis on church planting. And then everybody plays, just trying to equip people to follow and serve Jesus, not both in the church and in their everyday life.
It's great.
But there, it's a challenge. It sounds like everyone's plan looks really great on paper, but it's really hard to do in person and kind of keep it in the forefront, because vision and culture just drifts so quickly.
Yeah, and there's things that you don't have control over, right? Because you're developing people who have choices and need room to have their own journey with Jesus and all of those things. One of the things that we talk about a lot is living into both the gathered and the scattered, the gathered and the scattered. And so the gathered church gathering together for worship and teaching and celebration and all of those things, and then equipping and empowering them to live into the scattered spaces, their schools, their sports teams, their workplaces, their neighborhoods, all of those things. And really empowering everyday people to be a gospel presence, and empowered with the Holy Spirit to be making disciples in their everyday lives. How does living into those two things, it's, as you mentioned, it's vision is one thing, really truly living into it is a whole other thing. But how does living into both of those things kind of shape the culture of Elm City and even the formation of your people?
Yeah. It's almost, when you're church planting or starting, people are like, oh, what's your model? Are you going to be around groups or around Sundays? And you're kind of always thinking, maybe naively, optimistically, like, hey, we want to do both really well. We don't want to feel like we have to choose.
Yeah.
And so that, and who doesn't want to do that? But the gathered, we talk about it with people a lot. There's things that each one can do that are very, very unique. The power of coming, like setting up your schedule where you're coming together regularly and you're worshiping God with one another.
Yeah.
And of the 59 one another commands in the New Testament, there's a lot of them you are living out together on Sundays, and hearing God's word taught, staying on the same page, encouraging. And in our area in New England, often people who are seeking, they still want to come to a church. In their mind, that's where you go to learn about God, where they don't want to go to someone's house they don't know. They want to go it's almost like not an expert culture a little bit, but like, hey, if I go to the dentist, I want to know that guy went to dental school and is not just making it up. If I go to church, I want to know that the guy who's talking has at least studied. And so there's a missional component of Sundays that I think I undervalued in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then as people are scattered both into community groups during the week where there's so many of the one another's you can't live out on Sundays, and then just encouraging people out of 2 Corinthians 5 that you are an ambassador, or that is your core identity wherever you go, and bringing the message of reconciliation in word and deed. And so, really, my former associate, who's now our first church planter, Justin Barney, would always talk about how we look at like almost like the pedals on a bike. Kind of, you need both to keep momentum, and one pedal's really hard to kind of have it go around. Doesn't matter how good that pedal is. And so, the gathered and scattered, what we try to emphasize.
I love it. Another key component to formation for people, or really discipling people into living the life and way of Jesus, there's something important about life rhythms. And I know that that's important for you guys too. There's something really important about the rhythms of life that we have that really shape us personally, shape our families, shape the teams that we're leading. Can you talk about reach rhythms and tell us more about those? Tell us how people are living into those.
Yeah, so those I stole them from my friend Mike Jarrell, and when we got started, because it was just a really helpful way of growing up in great churches, but we're very much about information, and information equals transformation. And it's sort of one of those things that's like maybe or sometime, but also even our mission to be people who practice the way of Jesus together, that he's inviting us into a new way of life or a new type of living. And so our reach rhythms were an attempt to, how do we make that tangible so that people can be like, well, what does it mean to practice the way of Jesus together? Well, some of our 5 ways we do that would be, rest, and teaching people about, Sabbath and slowing down and having their own time with Jesus, and almost like more than the traditional quiet time, but not less. That I think I learned a lot from John Mark Comer on this years back. And he was saying, he was developing his church into mission and sending people out. He was realizing he was losing way more people to the culture than they were gaining. And it turned out because none of them had any practices. The things he was just assuming, like, well, of course Christians, read their Bible and rest and the scriptures. He's like, no one under 30 was doing that. And so trying to recapture that, eat and engage, this idea of hospitality, where, in Luke, you see Jesus, going to a meal, at a meal, leaving a meal. Just so much of his ministry happened either around a table or in the everyday stuff of life. And so, we're encouraging our groups, even, throw parties, invite people over, create these, third spaces where your relational networks can connect, acts of love, trying to help people just, hey, here's some tangible ways you can think to serve others. The C was for confession, and confession in the sense of learning how to sort of teach or speak the gospel to yourself. That in one sense, you confess what is true about yourself, and then confess back what is true about God and about you through that. And then home, sort of prioritizing your closest level of relationships, whether it's your actual family, whether it's your inner circle. and just trying to put these into regular rhythms of your life of what this looks like. And I think we'll go in seasons of success with it.
Mm-hmm.
The hard part, even talking to another pastor who worked with me, in one sense, he was like, he's a friend of mine, so we could say it sort of like cynically. He's like, good luck, because these things, you're trying to impact people's money and their schedules, which are the two most like cemented things. And so I would say there's been both success stories and challenges, because 7 years in, feeling like if this isn't the only thing we're talking about, we're not talking about it enough for people to live into it, because
Absolutely.
it just
I
takes
mean,
so much time.
it is so countercultural, and you're poking at idols, aren't you?
You're poking at idols, and most people hear it and they're like, I want to do that. You're not even fighting with them, but you're like, my life's not set up for it. I have so much muscle memory for doing it the other way. How many people like know they need to go to the gym and start eating healthy? Like, you don't have to convince them. But it's the actual, how do I get into these rhythms?
Yeah.
And then you sort of feel like it's the time and intentionality barrier so we've actually tweaked them a little bit this summer to try same thing, but maybe a little bit different, where we're doing a series called Rooted to Bear Fruit. And the 5 kind of practices we're going to lean people into would be, looking at Psalm 1, but, scripture. So helping people read through the New Testament this summer, prayer, community, witness, and service. And so they might not replace reach rhythms, but that same idea of how do we develop these regular practices to live out your faith. And they do make a difference, and you are seeing people lean into them and grow, but it's a lot harder than just having a, catchy slogan them up on your wall that people are automatically doing, living into them.
I mean, we talk about, absolutely. The thing is like, people have to be discipled into these things. Mm-hmm. So you're naming really important foundational values that really set the culture. And that's beautiful and so good. And also, people have to be discipled into these practices and into living the ways of Jesus in a way that gives them room to prune back some of the things, to create space and room for rest and Sabbath. Like you said, we can talk about that all day long, but until people have something to imitate and something to see, and boy, it's so compelling. The life is so compelling, and also, for so many, it feels like an impossibility.
Yeah, I think what's been maybe one of the more helpful about having some of this stuff simple and out front is it does give people the gift of clarity.
Yeah.
Of like, hey, is this a church for me? And it's like, well, just here's what we're trying to do. Here's where we feel like God is calling us to go. Here's what we want to try to do in and with you. And
and who we want to be.
Who we want to be. And you're invited into that. And there's no pressure to be perfect, but also, and actually the one thing I didn't mention about the culture piece that helps is, so we're, in the EFCA, where your church governance is congregational. So you have to have a membership process. And I remember talking to another pastor right when I started, and he had said that basically he developed a process for membership in his church that, in his words, was, if members get to vote on really important things, I want to have some sort of grid that ensures that members are at least attempting to follow Jesus and are on board with our mission, vision, and values. And so to be a member at our church, like a voting member, we tell people, hey, these are lived values. This is like what we want for you, not from you per se, but you can't even apply for membership if you're not committed to Sundays in a group, if you're not serving in some capacity, if you're not committed to maybe coming to some of our trainings, if you're not generosity, committed to unity, sort of these things that it's like you have to be living into, not just checking a box saying I agree with them. And then it also, your membership only lasts for a year. So every year you have to basically renew your membership.
Yeah.
Re-up, because that makes it where it's not like people on the rolls for 30 years that don't go there anymore. And it's kind of like, hey, it's not hard to re-up, but it's sort of fill out a form every year. And hey, how did these rhythms help you grow as a disciple of Jesus? That's sort of your reporting back. And that helps people self-select in and out. And that's also been pretty helpful with the partnership of, it's cool. I get to hear back from them. Here's how groups help me grow. Here's how serving helped me grow. Here's an idea for what I think the church could do this year. So
That's so great, Albie. It feels like some of these seemingly small decisions that you make about how you're living into these things together, it reinforces the idea that who we are as Elm City Church, as we're living into these things, we're not passively just believing that Jesus is real, and
yeah,
we're not you're not allowing them to sit back and be passive consumers. You're saying this is who we are and what we're actively trying to live into the life and way of Jesus together.
yeah, and it's like it's an invitation. There's no shame. Like if you don't
Yeah,
want
yeah,
to be a partner, you don't want to do those things. That's totally fine. I mean,
yeah.
we want
That's
to help
great.
you do that, but so
One of the other things that is that I'm actively thinking about a lot is the use of training spaces.
Mhm.
So we believe in powerful, sound, biblically solid teaching, and the gathered space. We believe in connecting people into community and how that helps them in their kind of formation of living the life of Jesus together. But there's something about training spaces that gives people really kind of practical steps to live into
Mhm.
these things. It helps them figure out how to go from like, yeah, I like that idea and I want to live that way. It seems like training spaces help them kind of make a plan, and take some action steps forward. How has training spaces been helpful for you guys? How have you kind of leveraged that?
Yeah, I would say, and I'm glad you brought that up because as I was thinking, probably the thing that has changed our church, shaped our church culture the most, not just in the last 3 years, but what has been the use of training.
Hmm.
And part of it came out of, I had this epiphany moment where I was talking to my friend Josh, who we were supporting as a missionary, and he asked me two questions, and both of them were, again, like, oh my goodness, what am I doing type moments. He goes, hey, just curious, what is your simple reproducing way that you're training everybody in your church to learn how to share their story and share the gospel? And what is your simple reproducing method of training everybody in your church to make a disciple who can make another disciple? And I was like, oh, I really wish I had a good answer for that. And I was like, honestly, we don't. And what I was finding was we had our rhythms, even our eat and engage rhythm, and people were doing them, and they were inviting people over, and then I was just kind of hoping if you sort of modeled stuff from the
Yeah.
front or talked, they would naturally know how to talk about Jesus, and nobody did, and nobody was doing it. And so it was the almost like, if this is the one thing that Jesus told us to do, to make disciples who can make other disciples, and I can't point to here's the specific training I'm doing to equip people to do that. What am I doing with all my time? And so it was sort of out of that we started doing some simple, these called gospel conversations trainings that come out of the work of a missionary named Ying Kai, who was
Mm,
in China, who
yeah.
led one of those really cool movements where you're just like, is this even real? And then
Yeah.
it's verified. And um, we got to spend some time with Ying. He came and did some stuff with our church a couple of years ago. But we just started with the simple, they call it 411, which is 4 questions and one piece of paper, 1 hour type training, which I've never been able to do in an hour. But it's the like just everyone in your church teaching them, can they do the discipleship equivalent of a layup? Do they know why they're called to make disciples out of the Great Commission and out of 2 Corinthians 5, their identity? Do they know who they would start with, teaching people to have an ecos list of just friends, family, neighbors to start regularly praying for opportunities? Do they know what they would say? So training people, how do you share your testimony? How do you share the gospel? And then a big one is, and then do you have loving accountability where people are going to ask you, when are you going to do this?
Yeah.
And that's really been huge, as I would say several hundred people from our church have gone through it. And you're not everyone's grasping onto it, but you'll have everything from sort of someone who's sort of a timid, shy introvert who is now has leaned into this and has the tools and feels equipped and is sharing their faith and is leading trainings now and training other churches to someone who's been a part of the church for a while, who comes up to you excitedly and was like, 2 months after training, see, I had my friend over and we were talking and Jesus came up. And for the first time, I felt like I knew what to do. And it was just really cool to just see how it's almost like the best way to think about it for me, trainings will change somebody's paradigm, but then you need all of the follow-up to change their practices.
That's right.
So if you want to find who are the people that are going to share your faith and share their faith and do that, train as many people as possible. Because if you train 100 people, you're going to find 8 or 9 that are really going to lean into it. But at the end of the year, you're like, wow, I have 10 more leaders than I thought. And so nothing else I've done is I've discovered 10 leaders in a year.
Yeah. Albie, this has been gold. So we've talked about, I'm just kind of reflecting on our conversation. We've talked about how language is really important, being able to name our values, and using that language often to really help people understand who we are, what we're about, the life that we're calling them into. We talked about rhythms and taking our values and turning them into actually lifestyle rhythms to help people actually start to practice some of these things in their everyday life. We talked about training spaces to help them take the rhythms, but actually help them learn the next piece of being able to make a disciple. One of the things that I know to be true is that creating an intentional culture in our churches is slow. It's long game. And so final question for you, what do you sense the Lord saying to you as a leader as you can continue to invest super intentionally in this way at Elm City?
Yeah. So I'm actually just about to start my first sabbatical. And so the board is allowing me to lean into that rest rhythm. And one of the things I'm going to be praying through over the sabbatical is sort of vision, what's next in this. And I think big picture, I feel like God is calling us, deeper into church planting, multiplication. There's a whole group of us pastors in the Free Church that are kind of banding together and forming cohorts of how can we do this together. And then with where Keene is, I feel called into really having a center, or not a center, but a way to train church planters, future pastors, bivocational leaders in some of this stuff. But what's specifically next for Elm City probably will be a lot of the same, but deeper. Like we really want to impact our city. And the only way to do that is by training and equipping and developing everyday followers of Jesus, because that's what every movement's built upon. And it has to be done in a way that the people that they lead to Jesus can lead other people to Jesus. And then they're going to need to know, well, how do we disciple them? And how do they start learning about Jesus? And if we have 4 or 5 people on staff, they can't do it all, like just every day. So I think it's going to be more, how do we do that more effectively than we're going in a wildly different direction.
That's so good. Thank you so much, Albie. This has been such a great conversation. If you're listening in and you're wanting more equipping to help you build a discipling culture in your church, we have several Disciple Making Leader Lab workshop days coming up for pastors and church teams scattered all throughout New England. We're also going to be launching a new 2-year learning community cohort this spring for churches to learn how to build a discipling culture in their context. Head over to visionnewengland.org and check out the Make Disciples resource page. If you're wanting practical tools and training to help you make disciples in your everyday life, we host monthly Disciple Maker digital workshops that are just for you. So again, check out the Make Disciples resource page at visionnewengland.org. Thanks for joining us for the Church in Action.
To support this program and accelerate evangelism, go to visionnewengland.org and click on Donate, or click Member to become a partner with us. This program is supported by the Palau Association, who are dedicated to proclaiming the good news, uniting the church, and impacting cities worldwide.
At Leadership Transformations, we believe that when you have the right resources to help you slow down and experience a deep and refreshing connection to God, you can become the discerning leader you know you are created to be. Friends, Steve Macchia here, and I have a free gift for your soul. It's called Pathways. Pathways is our weekly email aimed at offering you soul-nourishing content for the journey. It contains readings, prayers, spiritual practices, a link to the Discerning Leader podcast, as well as information about all of our upcoming soul care retreats, workshops, and online offerings. So head on over to leadershiptransformations.org today and sign up for this free resource. It will help you slow down and be more. God bless you, friends.